Could the Lakers' failed trade for Mark Williams actually be a blessing in disguise? In today's video, we're diving into the saga of the Lakers' near trade for Mark Williams and exploring why they ultimately decided to walk away. Plus, we'll examine how this decision could impact both the Lakers' long-term plans and Charlotte's future moves. Stick around for the full story, only here on Sports Frenzy TV. Alright, let's dive into this. So there's been a pretty interesting situation surrounding the Lakers recently, and it all started with their attempt to trade for a player they hoped could be a key piece for the future. They were going after Mark Williams, a young and talented center with a lot of upside, but things didn't quite go as planned. Here's the breakdown. The Lakers were looking to make a big move, one that could really set them up for the future. They were thinking long-term. Mark Williams, if healthy, could be their starting center for the next 5 to 7 years. They had high hopes, especially since they were giving up a decent amount of assets to get him. But here's the catch. They were worried about his injury history and whether he could actually stay healthy enough to contribute in the long run. Now, in the NBA, passing a physical is usually one of the first steps before any trade goes through. It's pretty standard. The idea is simple. If a player fails their physical, there is a real risk of them not being able to contribute as expected. Sometimes teams take that risk though. Maybe they trade for a guy who's already recovering from an injury, but they think they can still make it work long term. But that wasn't the case here. The Lakers weren't ready to take the chance with Mark Williams, especially not after looking at his medical history more closely. They had Mark Williams undergo the physical, and when the results came back, they found some things they didn't like. They ended up failing his physical. Now here's where things get tricky for the Lakers. By the time they got the results, the trade deadline had passed, which meant they were in a bit of a bind. They didn't have many options left. They couldn't change the terms of the trade, they couldn't add more draft picks or take any back. Their only real choices were to either approve the trade as is or rescind it entirely. No one wants to be in that position. Imagine the awkwardness of backing out of a deal after everyone has already made their plans. No team wants to deal with the fallout of sending players back to their previous teams after such a public trade. But despite all that, the Lakers ultimately decided to rescind the deal. They just weren't willing to take the risk with Williams' health. And here's the thing. This isn't the first time something like this has happened in the NBA. Sure, it's not super common, but it has happened before. Take, for example, the trade between Dallas and Philadelphia just recently. There was an issue with Caleb Martin's physical before the deadline. However, the trade was still far enough in advance that they had time to make adjustments. Dallas was able to get some extra draft compensation, and they felt comfortable moving forward despite knowing that Caleb Martin might not be 100%. So in that case, they were able to make a change and still feel good about it. The situation with the Lakers and Mark Williams was a little different though. For one, they were really concerned about his long-term health. It wasn't about whether he could play tomorrow or next week. It was about whether he could be their starting center for the next 5 years or whether his injury history would derail those plans. The Lakers were trading away valuable assets, and they weren't willing to risk it on someone who might not stay healthy enough to play at the level they needed him to. Another factor in this situation was that the trade deadline had already passed. With no time left to renegotiate, the Lakers couldn't go back to Charlotte and ask for extra picks or compensation to make the trade more appealing. They were essentially stuck. Either they accepted the trade as it was or they walked away. And even though no team wants to be in this kind of situation, they made the decision to back out. This situation actually reminds me of a few past trades in NBA history. One that stands out is the Kyrie Irving trade to Boston. In that deal, the Cavs traded for Isaiah Thomas as a key piece in the Kyrie trade, despite knowing he was dealing with a significant hip injury. They expected him to recover, but when they did his physical, they found some red flags. Instead of backing out of the deal though, they went back to Boston and asked for extra draft compensation. They ended up getting a second-round pick or two as part of the deal. Of course, this was before the deadline, so they had time to make those adjustments. Had the Lakers made their trade earlier in the year, maybe they could have worked something out like that. But because the deadline was so close, they didn't have that flexibility. So they had no choice but to rescind the trade, and that's a tough pill to swallow. There's another trade that comes to mind from way back in 2009 to 2010. Tyson Chandler, who was known for dealing with injury problems throughout his career, was supposed to be traded to Oklahoma City. However, when he went through his physical, the team failed him and the trade was rescinded. But the interesting part of this story is that Tyson Chandler didn't just disappear from the NBA after that failed physical. Instead, he ended up going to the Dallas Mavericks, where he was a key part of their defense and helped them win the NBA championship in 2011. If you look at that scenario, it's kind of a reminder that sometimes, even if a trade doesn't work out, things can turn around in unexpected ways. Now, when it comes to the Lakers, this situation is probably for the best. Sure, it's disappointing that they won't get Mark Williams, especially considering how badly they need a legitimate five to pair with LeBron and Luka. But they didn't want to trade away significant assets for a player who might not be able to stay on the court. After all, this is a crucial period for the Lakers. They're looking to build a team around Luka and set the stage for his future with them, especially since he's a free agent in 2026. The last thing they want is to tie themselves to a player who might not be able to contribute. But that doesn't mean this situation is without its consequences. Without Mark Williams, the Lakers now find themselves in a tough spot for the postseason. They were hoping to have him as a starting center, but now they're left scrambling. They're looking at Jackson Hayes as their backup five, and that's a far cry from what they were hoping for when they made the trade. With the deadline now behind them, they're going to have to explore other options. They could turn to the buyout market or look at potential free agents, but none of these options are going to give them the starting caliber center they were hoping for. They could try to get creative with their lineups, maybe even play Dorian Finney-Smith at the 5 or go small with LeBron, Luka, and some of the other players on their roster. But against teams like Denver, they'll be in trouble. Someone's got to guard Jokic, and unfortunately, that's not going to be Finney-Smith or Jackson Hayes. The Lakers were looking for someone to help them both now and in the future. They wanted a big guy to play alongside Luka for years to come. They could have gone for someone like Clint Capella, who has his own injury issues but would have provided a solid option in the middle. Or they could have looked at Nick Claxton, who's another potential center. But they chose Mark Williams because they believed he was a good fit for their long-term plans. It's a tough situation, but this is also a big lesson about the risks involved in trading for a player with a significant injury history. The Lakers took a chance and in the end, it didn't work out. But now they have to look ahead and figure out how to keep improving their roster for the future. So for Charlotte, the situation is a bit different. They got what they thought was a great deal when they sent Mark Williams to the Lakers, but now it's unclear what his value is around the league. Teams are going to look at his injury concerns and hesitate to pull the trigger on a trade. What was once a promising asset is now in limbo, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens next. At the end of the day, this just goes to show how quickly things can shift in the NBA. A trade that looks solid at first can fall apart due to unforeseen health issues, leaving teams scrambling to adapt. What do you think about the Lakers' decision to back out? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more NBA breakdowns. Catch you next time!